Welcome to Phoenixmasonry Live,
A show about Masonic museum artifacts,
interviews,
Masonic history.
and much more.
I am Frederick L. Milliken, Executive Director of Phoenix Masonry.
And I am Elena Llamas, Director of Public Relations for Phoenixmasonry.
And we are here to
Celebrate
our Freemasonry. And
celebrando
that's what
nuestra francmasonería.
and that's what we do on this show. We celebrate our Freemasonry. And we are here today to celebrate Dr. David Harrison. Dr. David Harrison is a UK-based Masonic historian and archaeologist who has written 8 books, 7 of them on the history of Freemasonry, and has a 9th book on the lost rites of Freemasonry coming out later this year.
His books are The Genesis of Freemasonry, The Transformation of Freemasonry, The Liverpool Masonic Rebellion and the Wigan Grand Lodge, A Quick Guide to Freemasonry, The York Grand Lodge, Freemasonry and Fraternal Societies, which he co-authored with Fred Lomax, The City of York, a Masonic Guide, Christopher Rawdon, The Lost Philanthropist, which, although it's not a book all about Freemasonry, it does touch upon Freemasonry and also Theosophy.
David Harrison has contributed many papers and articles on Freemasonry to various journals and magazines. His work appears in Philaethes magazine, Freemasonry Today, MQ magazine, The Square, Knight Templar magazine, Herodom, New Dawn magazine, among others. David has appeared on TV, radio, and web shows, providing expertise and insight into the subject of Freemasonry. We will link some of these appearances below this video for those interested in seeing more.
David obtained his PhD from the University of Liverpool in 2008, writing his thesis on the development of Freemasonry, which was published in 2009 as The Genesis of Freemasonry, which is the book we will be talking about today. David also has a degree in archaeology and history from the University of Wales and has worked as an archaeologist.
David is also a musician and lecturer, which is British for professor, having earned a master's degree prior to his PhD. Well, welcome to the show, David.
Thank you for coming, David.
Thank you. Thank you very much for
You know,
inviting me.
I've been waiting for this a long time, Brother David. Uh, my course of study in school was history. So I'm an amateur historian. You're the professional. But we both have a love of history, we both have a love of Freemasonry, and we both have a love of music. So we have a lot in common. And I can't wait to ask you some questions.
Well,
don't you think that historians make good Freemasons and Freemasons make good historians?
Well, they can do, I suppose. It depends what point of view they're coming from, really. But yeah, there's been a lot of historians in Freemasonry over the years. There's a lot of research lodges, so it's it does kind of go together, but it can be a hindrance as well, I think.
Okay, well, Elena, why don't you take it away?
okay. Well, I want to follow up with a question. What do you mean it can be a hindrance, David?
Well, I suppose if one of the questions that I got asked years and years ago when I first was doing the PhD, and they said, "Well, are you a Freemason?" And I says, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, there's a danger that you could be, a bit biased, really." And that's always a danger, because as a historian you've got to be quite neutral, really, and there's a possibility of straying into that kind of area, that grey area where you're a bit biased. So yeah, you've got to be careful,
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
being familiar with your work and with your book, Genesis of Freemasonry, I can say that that is one of the things that struck me about your work, and that I actually like about your work a lot, that you stick to the evidence. You're very good with providing, where you get your facts from, and you don't go off, and you make a point of not going off on legends or myths. And in fact, in Genesis of Freemasonry, you talk about how, because Freemasonry has been historically a very secretive society, there's not a whole lot of records, like, people writing in letters about, what they do in lodge. A lot of it is very mysterious to the general public. And so you had to, you faced legends, sometimes put by Grand Lodges themselves, or myths, as you call them in your book. And you really did try to stick to the evidence in your book and the rest of your work. So that's a comment we had on your book that we found very fascinating.
Yeah. Again, you've got that kind of two schools really, that exist. You've got the romantic one, without mentioning any authors' names. There's quite a lot of that around really. And they're the best sellers really, which makes it harder. There's been a lot of that stuff around, that link Freemasonry all the way back to, the Knights Templar or wherever, so that romantic school, is something that a lot of Freemasons read, and people that aren't Freemasons read as well, and you've also got the prejudice, because there is prejudice there, for Freemasons. People don't understand it as well, they're coming to it from this romantic perspective. They don't understand the organisation, and they're critical of it without fully understanding it, fully knowing what's going on, So you've got all that to contend with as well, and then within Freemasonry as well, you've got, different ththings going on there. There's different types of Freemasonry. There's the regular stuff, and then there's the irregular stuff. And as an author, you can't pick and choose your audience or your readership, if you like. So it could be anybody that wants to buy a book, and you end up, you've got to be open-minded, really, which can put you into conflict with other areas, within Freemasonry. So, it's not an easy job, really, writing about Freemasonry. That I should have wrote novels or something,
Yeah.
In fact, I might start doing that after this program.
There we go.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, you touched upon Templarism, and you call it the romantic view that Freemasonry is there's a continued line all the way from the historical Knight Templars into Freemasonry, and you say no, there's no evidence for that, because there's no evidence for that. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
No evidence for that, yeah. I mean, the Knights Templar, where I think that comes from, really, and other historians as well. In fact, this is something that I've been looking at for my latest book, which is coming out, the Lost Rites. There was plenty of these rites in France that came about in the mid-18th century, and they concentrated on the Scottish legend, the Scots Master theme, and there's certain rites such as Melissino's rite and Cagliostro's rite that the rite of strict observance. I don't know if these mean anything to you, but these are some of the rites that I'm looking at the moment. And they had this Scottish legend where the Knights Templar collapsed, in the Middle Ages, the 1300s, and they survivors fled to Scotland, where they survived as Masons. That's just a legend. There's no evidence for that at all. There's no documentary evidence from the period for that. And so what you've got in the 20th century, you've got a lot of speculative these speculative writers that come along without naming names, you know, they've made a career out of it, which is, you know, that's okay for them, you know, done okay, but that stuff without any foundation or any evidence or any proof, as educated people, if you like, you know, Freemasons and non-Freemasons. So this myth is developed, and it's believed by a lot of people, you know, when there's no historical evidence at all.
Are you open to the possibility that because all of these organizations, the Templars and Freemasonry is so secretive, as we were saying, are you open to the possibility that there is some connection that we just don't have the evidence, and until we have the evidence, we cannot say definitely, you know, yes, they were in Scotland after, you know, the collapse and this and that. Are you open to the possibility, like, well, maybe there was something we just haven't heard of, because it's just...
Second cup of tea, by the way. I made two just in case. It's a long program, this one. Well, no, I think I mean, history is what it is. You know, I mean, you know, you've got the evidence and you work off that, and you know, that's basically it, really. You know, it's not something that I'm hoping for, really. If there's a big document found somewhere, you know, that's great. You know, people will have to rewrite the books. You know, and that's what history's all about. You know.
So you're not married to your ideas. You just really are focused on the evidence, as any, you know, good scholar. You know, again, we're talking to Dr. David Harrison, not just David Harrison. He's a academically trained historian, and a really good one at that. And so your training comes through. It is very unique in Masonry, I would say, because precisely what we're talking about, your academic eye and your mind is really sharp, and it really cuts through the romance of it, and not in a deflating way, I have to add. If you have two blogs that we will be linking below. Mystical, a lot of it. Some of it is very esoteric, and some of it is very, you know, architectural and Masonic. So it's very varied. So I do recommend that the viewers check out your blogs. They're very, very interesting. And before we dive into the book we're going to talk about today, do you want to tell us about the art that you have on your background? That is you, right?
Oh, that one. Yeah, that one. Yeah. Well, that was painted by a friend of mine, and at one time, I can't remember which book it was now, but there was going to be a book coming out, and they wanted, they were fed up with me kind of looking scruffy, I think, in the photos, because I always look quite scruffy, you know, like shirt and washed out t-shirt and jeans and things, and where if you look at a lot of Masonic authors or scholars or writers, they're all there in the suit and the tie, with the bookcase behind them, you know, and all this kind of stuff. Well, I'm not really into that. A bit like Fred there. Look at Fred.
No tie. No tie.
He's like tie. So he said to me, "Well, do you want to kind of, you know, do a painting of you?" I think there was a guy knocking about that used to do portraits of Freemasons. I can't remember his name now, but anyway, there was a famous guy from Germany, Jean Rouch. I probably pronounced that wrong, actually, but he's a really nice guy, and he did a couple of sketches, and anyway, this guy that I know, he kind of painted that. And so it was going to go in this book, and anyway, they didn't kind of like put it in the end. You know, it's one of them who publishes. You know, they have ideas and they don't put it in. But it did go in eventually. Went into the later book at the back. So you know, so it's there, and it's me kind of painted on a Masonic kind of manuscript background, and it's got a quote from Thomas Jefferson on there, who wasn't a Freemason, but it's a great quote.
On tyranny, isn't it?
Let's get into the book.
On tyranny?
That's it, on tyranny, yeah, that's right, that's right. It's a good one. So, so what did Fred say something then? Was Fred?
Let's get into the book.
Let's go into the book.
Well,
Yeah.
let's get into the book. How did Genesis of Freemasonry come about? Tell us the story. Which you
Well,
probably told it a million times. One part it.
It's a very long story. We're going to be here for about 2 hours.
No.
Well,
No.
What happened was I did a degree in it was Welsh history actually, in archaeology, and I wanted to become an archaeologist, which I did start working as an archaeologist, but the money was terrible. And that's if you got paid at all. You know, it was it was good. You know, digging in holes in fields and things and stuff like that. And I thought, well, this is no good really. You know, I've got to pay the bills, buy a house, this kind of stuff. And so someone suggested doing a PhD. So I actually did an MA first, which was like part-time night school thing while I was messing about in archaeology. And someone then suggested, oh, you should do a PhD, because I was doing the MA on Freemasonry, on local Freemasonry. And someone said, oh, it'd be great as a PhD, that, you know. And so it happened quite easily. And I was at the University of Liverpool here doing this. So it just kind of happened really easily. And now when I look at students, I talk to students all the time, obviously, you know, being a lecturer and teacher, and they really struggle to try and get in to do a PhD. Freemasonry as a subject had never been done before, really. Not academically since David Stevenson and Margaret Jacob. I don't know if you're familiar with those two names.
Yes.
Very famous academics that have researched the history of Freemasonry. So that was a starting point, really, and I mean now there is more people doing it. You know, I get contacted all the time by people that want to do PhDs on the history of Freemasonry, but it's finding a tutor as well. It's quite difficult with a PhD. It's not an easy ride. You know, you've got to find a tutor, and then you've got to have a second tutor. You know, and you've also got to publish papers at the same time. You've got to attend conferences and you know, and do all the research as well, which you know can be quite heavy. Kind of takes over your life. So the PhD, I was doing it part time. Took me about 6 or 7 years part time. I was teaching at the same time. I'd abandoned archaeology because it wouldn't pay the bills. Yeah, it was that was a good time of my life, really. You know, kind of researching that, and I didn't know it was going to be a book until obviously I'd gone through my Viva and successfully defended the PhD, so you get awarded the doctorate, and then my tutor said, well, he always said that it would make a great book. We thought about an academic publisher, and the thing is with academic publishing is that you don't make any money from it. You know, it's great for your career and it's great to have a big publication like that. But these academic publishers normally sell the book at about £40 odd or something, which is about $60-70 or something. You know. So we had a chat about it, and he says, well, this really suits a more Masonic publisher, a popular publisher, really. That's where you're going to make the money. That's where you're going to get more, sell more, and get an outlet for it. And so anyway, someone hooked me up with Lewis Masonic, and Lewis Masonic just took one look at it and said, yeah, we'll do this. And that's how that book came along. But they changed the title. I think the original PhD title was something like the Masonic Enlightenment in England or something like that. You know, you know, and there was a few subtitles in there. But yeah, the title changed a few times. They were going to call it Origins of Freemasonry, and then something else, and then settled on Genesis of Freemasonry, which was a copy of another work. I think they pinched the title from another work that came out in the 40s. Newton Jones had Genesis of Freemasonry out.
Yes, we have that book on our website. I have to say that Lewis did a great job with the publishing. That it has some really nice illustrations in the middle of a lot of tombs that Masonic from 18th and 19th century.
Yeah, well, I did a chapter on that. There was because I was an archaeologist, or I'd worked as an archaeologist. My tutor said it'd be a good idea to have a chapter in there looking at the gravestones, because he was a non-Mason, you see. He knew about Freemasonry through Margaret Jacob and David Stevenson, he said to me that was his introduction to Freemasonry, and ever since, because he's a historian and he was going, you know, around churchyards and things and visiting libraries and things like this, he'd see the square and compass, and he said, well, this is like really interesting because it's a public way of a Freemason saying that they're Freemasons, you know. These gravestones, you know, it is a public announcement that they are Freemasons. And so it'd be great to do a chapter on that and look at all these crumbling headstones that you can find across the country, you know, and the change of symbolism. And indeed, if you look at, you know, that change, you know, in the 18th century, people had skull and crossbones on and it was quite common. But we started to know that there was a lot of Freemasons as well that had the skull and crossbones, and of course that's in the 3rd degree, not giving too much away, you know. But and then suddenly, after the English Union, you know, you get this more scientific, precise kind of, you know, the square and compass and other, you know, working tools and things like that, and sun and the moon and all this kind of stuff. So that was that chapter. And the original PhD had a lot of pictures in there. And Lewis Masonic got funny about using these pictures because they weren't digital pictures. They were just, you know, things that I'd kind of photocopied in, and you know, and there was all these copyright issues, and you know, because it was too close to the PhD, you wanted something a bit more jazzy. So and they only told me this on the Friday when they were going to print with it on the Monday, and they said, you've got to send us some fresh pictures. So I knew a girl who was a photographer, and on the Saturday we went out and basically took all these pictures of all these gravestones, and so that's why there's a lot of gravestone pictures in there. And there was a few things that we could get into, like there was a chapel in Tabley House, which is in Cheshire. We went in there, took these fantastic stained glass windows with the Masonic symbolism in there. That's it. That's the one. Yeah.
Well, let's get into a little bit of the meat of the book. Let me ask you, David. You mentioned 3 transitional periods in English Freemasonry. Can you talk a little about them for our viewers?
Yeah, I mean, it became easier to divide it up, you know, the history of Freemasonry into these transitional periods, because the original PhD was about the development of Freemasonry, not just about the origins. And of course, when it was published by Lewis Masonic, the Genesis of Freemasonry became the title, and so you know, the title brought in focus for the origins of it, but the book isn't really about that. It's all about the development of Freemasonry, right, from the 17th century to the Union, you know, the Act of Union, where the ancients and moderns came together in 1813. Yeah, the three transitional periods. The first one is basically where the stonemasons, the operative masons, if you like, we're meeting in lodges, and they start getting in speculative Freemasons. You know, like for example, in 1646, you get Elias Ashmole meeting in Warrington in a lodge, and he names all the lodge members, and there's one of them that's an operative Mason. There's a few other lodges as well. There's one in Dundee, I think. There's a few other lodges, you know, from the time. There's one in Chester, Scotland. There's quite a few in Scotland where you can see this clearly, you know, where you've got the operative Masons in there and speculative. In York as well, you know. So that's a transitional period, you know, where the operative is changing into speculative. And the administration of it is changing as well. And then you get a second phase, which really kind of starts with the Premier Grand Lodge, you know, 1717, and then you get these, what I term rebellions, really, where you get the ancients breaking off, if you like, and you've got the York Grand Lodge, which is, you know, a bit of a rebellion in itself, and then later on you've got the Wigan Grand Lodge as well, which is an outright rebellion. You know, that's a bit later though. And then, you know, the third phase kind of enters the you know, the union, where you know, both the ancient and the moderns come together. The ritual, English ritual, gets completely revised. Christian references get taken out. The Duke of Sussex, you know, forges a new ritual and basically a new administration, you know, and so we get the Freemasonry that we've got today. So you get these phases, you know, and what I tried to do was divide them up, and the three transitions was, you know, was nice really, you know. Obviously, the number 3 in Freemasonry, 3 degrees, and you know, that kind of thing, and it kind of worked out quite nicely, because what the tutor was kind of telling me was to, you know, try and put things in a simple presentation for people to understand and to read. Always try and make it simple was the best advice he ever gave me. You know, make it simple.
You mentioned medieval morality plays. How important a role do you think they played in the formulation of speculative lodges?
Well, the morality plays, when you look at what's happening in York and Chester and other places as well, these morality plays were quite essential for the not just the people that were taking part, you know, the guilds, which included, you know, stonemasons, carpenters, fishmongers, you know, all kinds of people like that, you know. But when you look at the ritual, the Masonic ritual today, and the comparisons have been noted by quite a few historians. You know, Neville Barker Cryer was one fantastic English Masonic historian that has commented on this a few times, and because obviously the Masonic ritual is a morality play in a way. I mean, you are both Freemasons, you know, so you recognise this, and you know, the whole story of Hiram Abiff and you know, the search for the lost word and all this kind of stuff, you know. So you get these themes embedded in these morality plays, you know, and you get a lot of Bible content, some biblical content going in there, and you know, it's presented well. And this is a time before theatre and before TV and radio and all this kind of stuff, you know. You're in the later medieval period and you know, and beyond, and it's a very popular thing for the community, you know, at the time. So yeah, you know, there's an influence there, especially when you look at the York and the Chester plays that were going on. So it's an interesting little aspect, you know.
Yeah, you write about a lot of Masons that had an effect on the development of English Freemasonry. Of all the British Masons you wrote about, who would you pick as the most influential on the course British Masonry took?
What, British history or British Freemasonry?
British Freemasonry.
Right. That's an interesting one, that, because obviously, you know, you're looking at England has got its own Grand Lodge, and so has Scotland, you know,
Would it
very,
perhaps be Desiguglia?
probably, yeah. I
I'm
mean,
butchering the name.
Jean Theophilus Desiguglia, yeah, he along with James Anderson, in my opinion, as I mentioned in Genesis of Freemasonry, was one of the main movers in developing the third degree ritual, really, because we know that there was only 2 degrees, you know, before the 1720s, and then suddenly this third one pops up, so you know, there's a lot of thought in that. You know, it's you look at who was responsible, and with Desiguglia, I mean, and with Anderson as well. I mean, they were writers. They were quite heavyweights in the 18th century. I mean, Desiguglia was a natural philosopher. He knew Isaac Newton. He was a poet. You know, he did some fantastic inventions, if you like, you know, as well. You know, he was very, very in-depth man, really, you know, fascinating character. He was a minister as well, you know, so he was one of these, I suppose, call them polymaths. Is that right? I would think that would be the term used, maybe. Fascinating character. I mean, apart from that, you've got a lot of poets in Freemasonry as well, you know, politicians, and George Canning was another one. He's a fascinating politician, English politician. You've got your poets. I mean, if you talk about Scotland, you've got Robbie Burns and Alexander Pope, which, again, the poetry of Alexander Pope and the writings of Jonathan Swift kind of filtered into the genesis of Freemasonry as well, because they were Freemasons. They were in London. They were looking at these, you know, examining these early lodges and the social scene around it, and that filters through, you know, as well. So the Devil Tavern, you know, it was all happening in the 1720s, 1730s, 40s in London, you know, for Freemasonry. It's a really, really big time where things were developing, you know.
Yeah, for the audience, in your book, we have you have provided a lot of information on so many historical characters, which you mentioned here, and more: Francis Bacon, Alexander Pope, Isaac Newton, numerous thinkers, and I found that really wonderful about the book. You find a lot of aspects of people's lives that you know, that readers may not know about these characters that are really, really fascinating. And you mentioned that before the 19th century, the ritual of Freemasonry was not written down, so it was memorized. It was basically
exposés, you know. Yeah, it was meant to be, you know, top secret, and people kind of memorize it, and the art of memory, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, hence we don't really know about the official side of it, the creation of it, really. What exactly it's like. We get these, you know, these exposés coming out. There's one in 1730. And Samuel Pritchard, and then later on, you know, there's a number of exposés being published, Jarkin and Boaz, 3 Distinct Knocks, and all these wonderful little exposés. Later on, you get Richard Carlisle's exposé, which is fascinating because you've got all these different grades, higher grades in there. You know, so but they weren't official. which is somebody obviously looking at a market, I would think, that's what publishers do, they see, well, we'll print this, if it sells, we'll print some more, but yeah, I mean, it leaves a historical document, that we can look at the rituals and see how things were developing and very interesting stuff.
So what would you say is the relationship influence of early Freemasonry and Freemasonry in its development? We're talking about up until the 19th century in your book, with Rosicrucianism.
Rosicrucianism.
Yeah. Yeah, because you do mention the current in your book.
Well, is that the Rose Croix or
yes,
the Rosicrucian of the 1600s? Or well, yeah. Well, this is something that I'm discussing in the Lost Rites, really, because the Rose Croix was a central degree, if you like, or a central grade of some of these Lost Rites that were performed, in France in the 18th century. And there's a lot of mysticism about it, really. There's it's a bit like a Masonic version of the Passion, if you like. It's very kind of Christian and quite mystical as well in a way. Very, very symbolic. With a pelican pecking at its breast to feed its young. Themes of the resurrection and the cycle of life, and but yeah, it's a real kind of nice degree that again has a moralistic side to it in a way. The theme of the performance of the degree, and that filtered into England. You got the Rite of 7 degrees and the Baldwin Rite and all these other kind of weird rites that were knocking about in France, and that only lasted a few years, But yeah, that's going to be something that's in my latest book that's coming out later this year.
Well, we're going to be showing the cover of that latest book. Do you want to tell us about the diagram on the cover?
Well, it's not been officially chosen as yet. By the publisher. I don't know if you've ever dealt with publishers, but they change their mind, and things.
Okay.
And but I was basically asked to kind of do a number of drawings, with different symbols on and different things on that reflect some of the rites, my interpretation of it, and it was coming up with a lot of weird things, a lot of geometrical kind of symbols and diagrams and things like that. And anyway, the one was chosen, and they're still messing about with the cover anyway. Well, yeah, there was a rite called Ellis Cohen's, which is quite famous. Some people made it. Ellis Cohen's. Have you ever heard of it?
Is he an artist, occultist?
No, it's a rite.
Oh, okay. Then no. You, Fred?
He's on track there. No, it's basically a rite from France in the later 18th century. A guy called Martinez de Pasquale, and yeah, you've heard of him, yeah. Louis Claude Saint Martin.
Yes.
Willemose. Yeah, they were all part of this rite called the Rite de Ellis Cohen's, and it basically stands for perfect priests, working off memory now, but the elected priests or something like that. And it was a magical rite. It was a rite of 9 degrees, and at the end of it, Pasquale gave his followers certain teachings to basically contact angels, and it was a pathway to God, a pathway to commune with God, really. And they, we don't know much about the actual ritual they were using. Arthur Edward Waite wrote a bit about it in the early 20th century, and he presumed that it was teachings that took place outside the lodge room. John Yarker, who was writing it again in the early 20th century, he thought it took place in the lodge room, you know. So you get these conflicting ideas, really. You don't really know, though. And but they were trying to contact the angels. So on the cover of the book, you know, I've basically put the you know, the 4 archangels on there around the symbol. Because we know that Pasquale told them to kind of draw a circle on the floor and put the angels for protection. And it's a bit, you know, it kind of crosses over to seances and things like that later on in the occult revival. In the occult revival in the 19th century, a lot of these guys, like John Yarker and Arthur Edward Waite, they wanted to revive some of these lost rites. There's another guy called Pappas. He was an amazing, interesting guy who was involved in Martinism. And Martinism is another one of these, still going today. And there's a few branches of Martinism today, but he effectively started Martinism in the 19th century, revived it in a way. I suppose the best way of putting it. And
so here we're talking far more mystical, almost magical, right?
Oh yeah. This is it. Not regular at all. I mean, this stuff, Memphis Mizraim, all this kind of stuff, and Cagliasto's Egyptian rite, and I mean, there's some very weird, strange rites, but wonderful stuff. Invented by brilliant minds, you know, and kind of Masonic, you know, but not recognised. And some are around today, you know, they've been revived and are still going. Which is very, 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 very interesting stuff, very in depth and very spiritual, and it's fascinating. So I wanted to reflect that on the cover, really.
Yeah, fascinating. I'd like to get back into the development of English Freemasonry for a moment. And I'm really curious, what triggered local lodges to come together in 1717 to form the Grand Lodge? What was the impetus?
Well, apparently there was only four lodges in London, and I suppose it was to have a governing body to protect the lodges, really, and to administer, to manage the lodges, you know, the administration that would manage the lodges. And if you look at the time, the period, it's just after the Hanoverians came to the throne, George I. You have a Jacobite rebellion occurring. Obviously there's another Jacobite rebellion later on in the 1740s, but in around about 1717 you've still got all that going on, you know, the Jacobite spies, you've got the Hanoverians coming through, you've got a lot of heavy political stuff. And I think for Freemasons at the time, you know, it's a secret society, you know, it was then, you know, they were meeting in a pub in a room upstairs, doing a bit of a ritual, then having a meal, you know, and I suppose for the four lodges to come together, you know, it was to bond as well, to become a proper body, you know, an organised body, and it worked because it drew in a lot of lodges that were meeting throughout the country. And a lot of them came together, and there was more lodges created, and then more, and it just grew and grew. So you know, it worked. And what you get in June 1717, you know, it was just a feast and a founding of this new organisation, you know.
And so this year, it's a celebration of 300 years of the creation of the lodge. And what are you planning for celebration, may we ask? I know you wrote a chapter in a book about this.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Well, two books actually. There was a book published by Lewis Masonic, which is coming out in a few months, I believe. There's a launch in Grand Lodge, and that's about the tercentenary. There's a number of writers that have written chapters for it, and looking at various different aspects of Masonic history, English Masonic history in the 300 years that's gone. So I've written a chapter for that, and then there's another book that's out with I think it's the Philalethe's, that's in the States, and I've written a chapter for that on the York Grand Lodge. So there's a number of books coming out, and there's a number of talks going on, lectures in lodges and things, and there's the Grand Ball in London.
Excellent. Well, before we run out of time, we wanted to ask you if you have any personal observation of any notable, to you, differences between Freemasonry as practiced in the UK and as practiced in the US. Have you noticed differences, commentaries?
Oh yeah. There's loads. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously we still do the three degrees, and it's a recognizable ritual, but it's got loads of differences, and the symbolism. I mentioned about the Duke of Sussex taking away the Christian elements of it, and there's a lot of symbols that disappeared in England. That was no longer used, like the beehive and Mercury, and you can still see them in older lodges, but on the whole they disappeared. Where in America you've still got that symbolism, that's still there. And in England, it was more of a up until recently, I'd say it was more of a middle class dominated society, really, and it was treated as such, like, hence we have a big festive board at the end, and it's all very important, to dress well, the tie and the suit, the morning suit, and on maybe even a dinner suit, and the dining etiquette as well, and the manners, table, obvious table manners and things like that, and the toasting. Well, in America, the lodges that I've been to, it's still fantastic. I can remember going to one in Florida last year, and it was great. Guys coming in jeans and t-shirt, just like I'm dressed now.
That's not all. In the northern U.S., they do less of that. It's a southern thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I went to Massachusetts a few years ago, and New York. There were slightly different there.
I was raised in Plymouth Lodge, where the Pilgrims landed.
Oh, right, very good. Yeah.
We can't leave the subject of this book. We can't leave this book without at least you saying something about the influence of the Royal Society on the development of Freemasonry, and for our viewers, what the Royal Society was and how great its influence was.
Well, the Royal Society was fantastic. Kind of when it started, after Charles II was put on the throne, and the Restoration, if you like. It was a group of natural philosophers, and a lot of them just happened to be Freemasons. You've got Elias Ashmole in there. You've got Christopher Wren. It's still debatable whether he was a Freemason, as we know Freemasonry now, but he was in there. And Isaac Newton, for example. Some brilliant minds. And throughout the history of Freemasonry, there's always been many Freemasons that are members or fellows of the Royal Society. So the early history of Freemasonry is very much entwined with the Royal Society. With Desaguliers, we mentioned him before. I mean, it's completely fascinating, really. You know, it does cross over a lot. You know, I mean, I can remember when I was doing my PhD, I was looking at this paper that Desigulier did about the meridian, and now, you know, if you used to English ritual, I don't know if it's mentioned in the Preston Web, or you know, the rituals that you do over there, but in the emulation, it talks about the meridian in the ritual, you know, and indeed the word can be found in earlier exposés, you know. So you've got these little words that come out of these, you know. It reminds you of natural philosophy, and you know, so there's a lot in there, you know.
Did the Royal Society sort of influence or dictate the esoteric discussion of Freemasonry, where it went?
I don't think it dictated it. It influenced it. I would think, because so many influential minds that were fellows of the Royal Society that were Freemasons as well, and I'm sure that things filter through. I mean, the Freemasons today, you know, whatever your background is, whatever your work is, or, you know, things do filter into discussion, you know, in the festive board, or, you know, when you're doing a practice in a lodge, or when you're at the lodge, you know. So these Freemasons, you know, did have an influence, you know.
Well, David, we're having a great time, but we're running out of time. We're going to spend the last few minutes, if you will, talking about your music. This is not, it's not Masonic music. It's what are your influences? Talk about your music.
Well, music, before I actually went into Freemasonry, I did dabble in music. In the 1990s, you know, I was in a number of bands, and you know, we used to write songs and, you know, and stuff as bands do, garage bands, you know, from the 60s, you know. Yeah. And
right.
Yeah, you know, we split up like bands do, and then it was only later on, in the early 2000s, 2003 or 4, you know, I had all these songs together, and I was living in Liverpool then, and I met a guy called Jeff Davis, Jeff Davis is a complete legend in Liverpool. He's a guy that runs an indie label, and was behind all these Liverpool bands that came out in the late 70s, early 80s. You know, if he wasn't behind them, he knew them, you know, and he had some kind of influence on them. I was introduced to this guy, and he listened to some of the old demo tapes that I had from the 90s, and he was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. So we ended up doing an album, and it was released, and yeah, it did okay in an underground kind of way, you know. And but then obviously I was doing the PhD at the same time. So the PhD took over, and then obviously the Masonic writing took over. So
well, we will be linking your music below for viewers to hear, and also links to your blogs, so people can visit you there. And we've run out of time. David, thank you for coming. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I'm sure we could have gone on and on talking about Masonry and other things. And we want to thank you for coming.
Very good, yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Very, very, very nice to have you with us. I'm fascinated with what you do.
It's great to be on. Thank you.
For lodges and Grand Lodges and Masons who would like to have David Harrison come as a speaker, he can be contacted on his website linked below. And also you will find here linked below an interview that David did with me on behalf of Phoenixmasonry. We also have a special shout out for Alex Powers, host of the online show Historical Light, for all the technical assistance that he provided us in the making of this episode. Historical Light is a new web show. It's about a month younger than ours. If you haven't checked it out, it's a really great show, Historical Light. So thank you, Alex.
Welcome to the fourth installment of Phoenixmasonry Live's Masonic Artifact Series.
I am Elena Llamas, Director of Public Relations for Phoenixmasonry.
And I am Frederick L. Milliken, Executive Director of Phoenixmasonry. And today we are going to show you this artifact. It was a gift from my sister at Christmas time, and she thought she was giving me a Masonic jewel. And it says right on it, up in the ribbon, and the words around the middle, Grand Lodge of England. So she thought it was the Masonic Grand Lodge of England. But it's not. It's the RAOB, or Royal Antediluvian Order of Buffaloes. And its symbol, this is a first degree jewel. The symbol on the front is one of a kangaroo. The back is inscribed, and it says, first degree, March 31st, 1904. Brother J. Bradshaw, Alexandra Lodge, number 51, Crewe, England.
The RAOB was begun in the Harp Tavern opposite the Drury Lane Theatre by the artist Joseph Lyle and comedian William Sinnett, along with stagehands and theater technicians in August 1822. It drew its name of the buffaloes from a popular song of the time, We'll Chase the Buffalo. The first meeting is historically the Phoenix Lodge No. 1. As members toured the country with various shows, lodges were opened in other towns. During the 19th century, the order spread throughout the British Commonwealth, and lodges now exist in Britain, Northern Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Middle East, India, Africa, Gibraltar, and Cyprus. The order's honorifics of royal, when it did not have royal patronage, nor a royal charter, and antediluvian, when in fact its foundations are of historical record, or that it is an order, although it had no standing nor recognition from any house of nobility, are meant to add mock solemnity to its fellowship status and have no more veracity than that it's having anything to do with the buffalo. The seditious and riotous assembly acts of the late 19th century affected the gatherings of clubs throughout Britain. To overcome this and show the buffaloes were not subversive to the interest of the state, the order described itself as the Loyal Order of Buffaloes. The word loyal was often mispronounced as royal, and soon it stuck. The addition of antediluvian, meaning before the time of the flood in the Bible, occurred in the 1850s. However, the Royal Warrant Act required any organization using the royal prefix to register with the Lord Chamberlain's office and to desist from using the title if permission was not granted. Since the Buffaloes had been using the title from the 1840s, the Lord Chamberlain agreed that no objection would be raised on continued use of the title on the grounds of long usage, provided no act by the order arose that would disgrace its use.
The RAOB is a philanthropic and charitable body. Lodges and provinces are at liberty to undertake whatever activity they consider appropriate for the needs of the community in which they work and live. The RAOB has 4 degrees of membership. First degree is known as a kangaroo. Don't ask why. Second degree, or certified primo. Third degree, or Knight Order of Merit. And fourth degree, or Roll of Honor.
Linked here below, you will find a fantastic link to Phoenixmasonry, where you can find more information, jewels, and history on the order. We have also linked the Australian website for the order, where you can see the brethren today and how similar their regalia is to that of Freemasons. Lastly, you will find the British website for the order. Here you can see how the regalia differs somewhat in color, but it's still very similar to that of Freemasons.